I watched through my frosted window as Brenda Morrison marched across my driveway in her designer snow boots, grabbed my brand-new Arian snowblower from my garage, and started wheeling it toward her house like she owned the place. My name is Xavier Vance, and I had lived in the Meadowbrook Estates subdivision in Buffalo, New York for exactly 8 months when this nightmare began. I moved there after my divorce, thinking a fresh start in a quiet neighborhood would do me good. The house was perfect, a 3-bedroom colonial with a 2-car garage and a decent-sized yard. What I didn't realize was that I had just signed my life away to the most controlling homeowner association in Western New York, and Brenda Morrison was its president. I threw open my front door and jogged down the driveway. The December wind cut through my flannel shirt, but I was too angry to care about grabbing a coat. "Brenda, what are you doing with my snowblower?" I called out. She stopped and turned around, her perfectly highlighted blonde hair somehow staying in place despite the wind. She had that look on her face, the one that said she was about to explain something to someone she considered intellectually inferior. "Xavier, the HOA bylaws clearly state that all homeowners must clear their sidewalks within 12 hours of snowfall. You failed to do so after yesterday's storm," she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "Brenda, it snowed 6 inches yesterday evening. It's 7 in the morning. The 12 hours aren't even up yet." "Well, I'm being proactive. Since you weren't out here clearing your walk, I assumed your equipment was broken, so I'm borrowing it to clear your sidewalk for you. You should be thanking me, actually. I'm saving you from a fine." I stepped closer, my breath creating clouds in the cold air. "First of all, I was planning to clear it this morning. Second, you can't just take my property without asking. Third, I don't need you to do it for me." Brenda's expression hardened. "As HOA president, I have the authority to ensure compliance with our community standards. If that means taking matters into my own hands, so be it. You have the authority to fine people, not to steal their stuff. Put it back." She ignored me completely and continued wheeling the snowblower toward her house next door. I stood there for a moment, debating whether to physically stop her or call the police. Before I could decide, she had already reached her driveway and was pulling the starter cord. The engine roared to life, and I watched in disbelief as Brenda began clearing my sidewalk with my own snowblower. She had never operated one before, that much was obvious. She was gripping the handles wrong, pushing it way too fast, and not engaging the auger properly. Snow was flying everywhere except where it was supposed to go. I walked back to my garage seething. This was typical Brenda. In the 8 months I had lived here, she had sent me violation notices for having my garbage cans visible from the street 1 hour before the pickup window opened, for planting flowers that weren't on the approved color palette list, and for parking my truck in my own driveway facing the wrong direction. Every single notice came with a threat of fines ranging from $50 to $500. I grabbed my phone and started recording her using my equipment. If she damaged it, I wanted proof. Through my camera screen, I watched her struggle with the machine. She was yanking the handles back and forth, clearly frustrated that it wasn't moving the way she wanted. Then it happened. Brenda jerked the snowblower to the left too aggressively. The machine lurched, she stumbled, and suddenly she was on the ground. The snowblower tipped over on its side, the engine still running, the auger spinning uselessly in the air. I ran over, genuinely concerned despite my anger. "Brenda, are you okay?" She was lying in a snowbank, her face red with embarrassment and rage. "Don't you touch me. This is your fault." "My fault? You stole my snowblower. I was helping you and your defective equipment attacked me." I reached over and shut off the engine. "It's not defective, you don't know how to use it." Brenda struggled to her feet, wincing, My ankle. I think I twisted my ankle. I'm calling my lawyer. You're going to pay for this, Xavier. Pay for what? You took my property without permission and hurt yourself because you don't know how to operate it. That's not my problem. We'll see what my lawyer says about that. She limped dramatically toward her house, leaving my snowblower lying on its side in the snow. I righted the machine and inspected it. The handlebar was bent. There was a crack in the plastic housing, and when I tried to restart it, something in the engine made a grinding noise it definitely hadn't made before. My $900 snowblower, purchased just 3 weeks ago, was damaged. I wheeled it back to my garage and took detailed photos of every scratch, dent, and crack. Then I went inside to warm up and figure out my next move. 3 days later, I received a certified letter. It wasn't from Brenda's lawyer, though. It was from Brenda herself on official HOA letterhead. Dear Mr. Vance, it began. On December 15th, while performing HOA duties to maintain community standards, I was injured due to negligent maintenance of your snow removal equipment. As a result of this incident, I sustained injuries including a sprained ankle, bruised hip, and emotional distress. My medical bills currently total $3,847.52, and I expect this amount to increase as treatment continues. As the owner of the defective equipment that caused my injuries, you are liable for these expenses. Please remit payment within 30 days to avoid further legal action. Additionally, you are being fined $200 for failure to properly maintain your equipment and $150 for creating a hazardous condition that endangered an HOA officer. Total amount due, $4,197.52. I read the letter 3 times, each time getting angrier. She stole my property, broke it, injured herself through her own incompetence, and now wanted me to pay her medical bills and fines on top of it. I immediately called my insurance agent, Frank, who I had known since college. Frank, you're not going to believe this, I said, and explained the entire situation. There was a long pause. Xavier, tell me you have video of her taking your snowblower. I have video of her using it right before she fell. Good, don't pay anything, don't admit to anything. Forward me that letter and any other documentation you have. I'll get our legal team on it. This is ridiculous. She's saying I have to pay almost $4,000. She can say whatever she wants, doesn't make it true. If she took your property without permission and injured herself, that's on her. We'll fight this. I felt a little better after that call, but the relief was short-lived. The next day, I found a formal HOA violation notice attached to my front door. Violation: damaged snow removal equipment visible from street. Fine, $300. Violation: creating attractive nuisance in garage. Fine, $250. Violation: causing injury to HOA officer. Fine, $500. Total fines, $1,050. Payment due within 15 days. An attractive nuisance. My snowblower in my own garage. This was insane. I drove to my lawyer's office that afternoon. His name was Marcus Webb, and I had used him for my divorce. He was tough, smart, and didn't put up with nonsense. Marcus read through all the letters while I sat across from his desk. When he finished, he looked up at me with raised eyebrows. This woman is either incredibly stupid or incredibly arrogant, maybe both. So I don't have to pay this. Hell no, you don't have to pay it. She committed theft. You have video evidence. She injured herself through her own actions. And now she's abusing her position as HOA president to harass you. We're going to crush this, Xavier. But I need to know, do you want to just defend yourself, or do you want to go on offense? What do you mean? I mean we can fight these claims and probably get them dismissed. Or we can countersue for the damage to your snowblower, harassment, abuse of authority, and emotional distress. We can also file a complaint with the county about HOA misconduct. I thought about all the violation notices I had received over the past 8 months. The petty complaints, the threats, the constant feeling of being watched and judged. I thought about my neighbors, most of whom seemed terrified of Brenda. "Let's go on a fence," I said. Marcus grinned. "Good man. Give me a week to prepare everything. Don't respond to any more letters from her. Don't talk to her. Don't even look at her if you can help it. Let me handle this." That week was torture. Brenda sent 2 more letters demanding payment. She left notes on my door. She even called me 4 times, leaving increasingly angry voicemails about how I was avoiding responsibility and how the HOA board would be discussing my membership status at the next meeting. The HOA board meeting was scheduled for the following Tuesday evening at the community center. Marcus told me to attend, but to let him do all the talking. When we arrived, the meeting room was packed. Apparently word had spread about the drama, and people were curious. I recognized most of my neighbors. Some gave me sympathetic looks, others avoided eye contact entirely. Brenda sat at the head of the table with 4 other board members. She was wearing a walking boot on her foot, which I suspected was more for show than medical necessity. When she saw me walk in with Marcus, her face went pale. "This is a closed HOA meeting," Brenda announced. "Lawyers are not permitted." Marcus smiled politely. "Actually, Mrs. Morrison, HOA bylaws state that homeowners may bring legal representation to any meeting where disciplinary action is being considered. Since my client has been threatened with fines and potential membership termination, I have every right to be here." One of the other board members, an older man named Donald, nodded. "He's right, Brenda. Let's just proceed." Brenda shot Donald a look that could have melted ice, but she continued. "Fine. We're here to discuss the multiple violations committed by Xavier Vance and the matter of his liability for my injuries sustained while performing HOA duties." Marcus stood up. "Before we discuss any alleged violations, I'd like to address the actual crime that was committed. Mrs. Morrison, on December 15th at approximately 7 in the morning, you entered Mr. Vance's property, took his personal property without permission, and damaged it. That's called theft and vandalism. We have video evidence." He pulled out his laptop and played the video I had taken. The room was silent as everyone watched Brenda wheel my snowblower away while I clearly objected. "I was performing my duties as HOA president," Brenda sputtered. "Your duties don't include stealing," Marcus replied calmly. "Now, regarding the injury you sustained, that occurred while you were operating stolen property without the owner's consent and without proper knowledge of how to operate it. Mr. Vance bears 0 liability for that injury. In fact, he would be well within his rights to press charges for theft." Another board member, a woman named Patricia, spoke up. "Brenda, is this true? You just took his snowblower. He wasn't clearing his sidewalk fast enough." "The 12-hour window hadn't even expired yet," I added. Donald rubbed his temples. "Brenda, this is bad. This is really bad." "I was trying to help the community maintain standards," Marcus continued. "Furthermore, Mrs. Morrison has abused her authority as HOA president by issuing fraudulent fines, making threats, and attempting to extort money from my client. We have documentation of everything. Now, we can resolve this in one of 2 ways. Option 1. Mrs. Morrison drops all claims against Mr. Vance, pays for the repairs to his snowblower, resigns as HOA president, and agrees to stop harassing him. Option 2. We file criminal charges for theft, we sue in civil court for damages and harassment, and we report this HOA to the county for investigation of corrupt practices." The room was completely silent. Brenda's face had gone from red to white. "You can't do this to me," she whispered. "I absolutely can," Marcus said. "And I will. You have until the end of this meeting to decide which option you prefer." Donald cleared his throat. "I think we need to discuss this as a board. Can we have a 15-minute recess?" Everyone filed out of the room except the board members. Marcus and I waited in the hallway. Several neighbors came up to me, offering support. "She's been terrible to everyone," one woman told me. "Last month she fined my teenage son for skateboarding in our own driveway. She made us repaint our entire house because the shade of beige was 2 tones off from the approved palette," another neighbor added. "Cost us $8,000. The stories kept coming. Brenda had been terrorizing the neighborhood for 3 years, since she had been elected HOA president. People were afraid to challenge her because she would retaliate with fines and violations. When we were called back into the meeting room, Donald looked exhausted. "We've discussed the situation," he said. "First, Brenda, you're suspended as HOA president effective immediately while we investigate this matter. Second, all fines against Mr. Vance are rescinded. Third, we agree that the HOA will pay for repairs to Mr. Vance's snowblower. Fourth, we recommend that you drop your medical claims against Mr. Vance as the board believes you have no legal standing." Brenda stood up abruptly. "This is a coup. You're all conspiring against me. I've done everything for this community, and this is how you repay me." "Brenda, you stole someone's property," Patricia said gently. "We can't defend that." "I was helping." "That's not helping," Donald said. "That's not even legal." Brenda grabbed her purse and stormed out of the room, her walking boot thumping dramatically with each step. Marcus turned to the board. "So we have an agreement. Mrs. Morrison will pay for the snowblower repairs and drop all claims. We'll do our best to convince her," Donald said. "But we can't force her to do anything. She's a private citizen." "Then I'll see you all in court," Marcus replied. Over the next 2 weeks, things escalated. Brenda refused to drop her medical claims. She hired her own lawyer, a guy named Richard Sterling, who sent me a letter full of legal jargon basically saying I was responsible for her injuries because I owned the equipment and failed to secure it properly. Marcus filed a countersuit for theft, property damage, harassment, and abuse of authority. He also helped me file a police report for the theft. The Buffalo Police Department wasn't particularly interested at first. They considered it a civil matter, but Marcus pushed them, citing the video evidence and the fact that Brenda had taken property valued at over $900. Finally, 2 officers showed up at Brenda's house to take a statement. I watched from my window as they talked to her on her front porch for about 20 minutes. She was animated, pointing at my house repeatedly. The officers remained calm and professional, taking notes. One of them knocked on my door afterward. His nameplate read Officer Chen. "Mr. Vance, we've taken Mrs. Morrison's statement. She claims she was acting in her capacity as HOA president and that she had authority to take your snowblower to ensure community compliance." "That's not how HOA authority works," I said. "We know. We've dealt with overzealous HOA presidents before, but this is pretty extreme. We're going to write up a report and send it to the DA's office. They'll decide if charges are warranted. In the meantime, we've advised Mrs. Morrison not to touch your property again." "Thank you, officer. One more thing," Officer Chen added. "She mentioned you've been harassing her, said you recorded her without consent and have been threatening her with lawsuits." "I recorded her using my stolen property in a public space." "That's legal in New York. And yes, I'm suing her because she's trying to make me pay her medical bills for an injury she caused herself." Officer Chen nodded. "That's what we figured. Just wanted to hear your side. Stay available, we might need to follow up." The preliminary court date was set for mid-January. In the meantime, the HOA held an emergency election, and Brenda was officially removed as president. Donald took over as interim president, and his first act was to reduce the ridiculous number of rules and regulations Brenda had implemented over the years. But Brenda wasn't done. Not by a long shot. In early January, I received a notice that Brenda was seeking a restraining order against me. Her petition claimed I was stalking her, threatening her, and causing her emotional distress. The hearing was scheduled for January 10th. Marcus was livid when I showed him the paperwork. "This is retaliatory. She's trying to intimidate you into dropping your suit. Will the judge see through it?" If the judge has half a brain, yes, but we need to be prepared. Gather any evidence of her harassing you. Emails, letters, voicemails, everything. I spent 2 days compiling a folder full of documentation. Violation notices, threatening letters, voicemail transcripts. I had pages and pages of evidence showing Brenda's pattern of harassment toward me and other neighbors. The restraining order hearing was held at the Erie County Courthouse. Brenda showed up with her lawyer, Richard Sterling. She was still wearing the walking boot, and she had added a neck brace for good measure. The judge, a stern-looking woman named Judge Kathleen Patterson, reviewed both petitions. Brenda went first. "Your Honor," Richard Sterling began, "my client has been subjected to months of harassment by Mr. Vance. After she was injured by his defective equipment, he has stalked her, threatened her with lawsuits, sent his lawyer to intimidate her, and even filed false police reports against her. She lives in fear every day." Judge Patterson looked at Brenda. "Mrs. Morrison, do you have evidence of this stalking and threatening behavior?" "He recorded me without my permission," Brenda said, her voice shaking. "He watches my house from his windows. He sends me threatening letters through his lawyer." "Letters from a lawyer regarding a lawsuit aren't threats, they're legal communication," Judge Patterson said dryly. "Do you have evidence of stalking?" "He's always outside when I am. It's too much of a coincidence." "You live next door to each other, correct?" "Yes, but so you're bound to be outside at the same time occasionally." "Anything else?" Brenda's lawyer jumped in. "Your Honor, there's a pattern of aggressive behavior here. Mr. Vance has made it clear he wants to destroy my client's reputation and drive her from her home." Marcus stood. "Your Honor, may I respond, please?" Marcus presented the evidence we had compiled, the video of Brenda taking the snowblower, the dozens of violation notices, the threatening letters demanding payment, the police report. Everything was organized chronologically and clearly documented. "Your Honor, the reality is the exact opposite of what Mrs. Morrison claims. She has harassed my client for months. She stole his property, damaged it, and then tried to extort thousands of dollars from him. When he refused to pay and defended himself, she filed this retaliatory restraining order. This is a clear abuse of the legal system." Judge Patterson reviewed everything carefully. The hearing took almost 2 hours. Brenda testified, crying several times and claiming she was just trying to do her job as HOA president. I testified, calmly explaining the timeline of events and presenting evidence for each claim. Finally, Judge Patterson made her ruling. "I'm denying the petition for a restraining order. Mrs. Morrison, the evidence does not support your claims of stalking or harassment. In fact, the evidence suggests you have been the primary aggressor in this situation. Mr. Vance has every right to pursue legal action against you for the damage to his property and your attempts to collect money you're not owed. This restraining order petition appears to be retaliatory, and I don't appreciate my courtroom being used for such purposes. If you file another frivolous motion, I'll consider sanctions." Brenda burst into tears. This is so unfair. I was just trying to help. Helping doesn't involve taking other people's property, Judge Patterson said firmly. We're adjourned. Walking out of the courthouse, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Marcus clapped me on the back. That went as well as it could have, he said. Now we focus on the main lawsuit. But before our court date arrived, something unexpected happened. Donald from the HOA board called me on a Friday evening in late January. Xavier, I need to tell you something. We've been doing a full audit of HOA finances during Brenda's tenure, and we found some irregularities. What kind of irregularities? The kind that involve missing money. About $40,000 worth of missing money. I sat down heavily on my couch. Are you serious? Dead serious. We're bringing in a forensic accountant, but it looks like Brenda has been writing herself checks from the HOA account for things like community beautification and presidential duties that were never approved by the board. We're planning to report this to the police. This just keeps getting worse. There's more. Remember those fines she kept levying on everyone? We can't find records of most of that money being deposited into the HOA account. We think she was pocketing the fine money. The forensic accounting investigation took 3 weeks. In mid-February, the results were clear. Brenda had embezzled approximately $43,000 from the HOA over 3 years. She had created fake invoices, written unauthorized checks, and collected fines that she never reported to the HOA board. The police arrested her on a Thursday morning. I watched from my window as 2 officers led her out of her house in handcuffs. She was crying and protesting, claiming it was all a misunderstanding. Her husband, a quiet man named Robert who I had barely ever seen, looked devastated. The arrest made the local news. Former HOA president arrested for embezzlement ran on every Buffalo station. The story detailed her abuse of authority and the theft from homeowners. Several of my neighbors were interviewed, sharing their own horror stories about Brenda's reign of terror. My lawsuit against her was still pending, but now it seemed almost redundant. Her lawyer, Richard Sterling, withdrew from representing her. She was assigned a public defender for the criminal charges. Marcus advised me to continue with the civil suit anyway. Just because she's facing criminal charges doesn't mean you'll be compensated for your snowblower and the harassment you endured. We need to see this through. The civil trial was scheduled for early March. By that time, Brenda had been released on bail with conditions that included not contacting me or any other Meadowbrook Estates residents, except her immediate family. The trial lasted 2 days. It was held in Buffalo City Court before Judge Michael Romano. Brenda's new lawyer, clearly overwhelmed by the mountain of evidence against her, tried to argue that she had been performing her duties in good faith, and that any financial irregularities were due to poor record-keeping, not criminal intent. Marcus systematically destroyed every argument. He presented the video evidence of the theft. He showed the threatening letters. He brought in a snowblower repair specialist who testified that my machine had sustained $840 in damages. He presented evidence of Brenda's pattern of harassment not just toward me, but toward dozens of other homeowners. I testified about the stress and anxiety her harassment had caused me. I talked about being afraid to park my car in my own driveway or plant flowers in my own yard for fear of another violation notice. I described watching her steal my property and then having to defend myself against her baseless claims. Several neighbors also testified, describing their own experiences with Brenda's tyranny. One woman talked about being fined $500 because her Christmas lights were white instead of multicolored, which apparently violated some obscure HOA aesthetic guideline Brenda had invented. A man testified about being threatened with a lien on his house because his lawn was 1 inch taller than the maximum allowed height during a week he was in the hospital with pneumonia. The pattern was clear. Brenda had used her position as HOA president as a personal fiefdom, terrorizing residents and enriching herself in the process. Brenda took the stand in her own defense, which her lawyer clearly didn't want her to do. She was emotional and combative, insisting she had only ever tried to maintain community standards and that everyone was ganging up on her because she held people accountable. "I dedicated 3 years of my life to that neighborhood," she said tearfully. "I worked tirelessly to keep property values high and the community beautiful. This is the thanks I get. Everyone turns on me the moment I hold one person accountable for his negligence." Marcus Cross examined her, and it was brutal. "Mrs. Morrison, you testified that you took Mr. Vance's snowblower to help him comply with HOA regulations, correct?" "Yes." "Did you ask his permission?" "I didn't need to. I had the authority as HOA president." "Can you show me where in the HOA bylaws it states you have the authority to take residents' personal property?" Brenda hesitated. "It's implied in the enforcement provisions." "Implied? So it doesn't actually say you can take people's property?" "No, but yes or no, Mrs. Morrison?" "No, it doesn't explicitly say that." "So you took his property without permission and without any legal authority to do so." "I was helping." "You were helping yourself to his property." "Mrs. Morrison, you understand that taking someone's property without permission is theft, regardless of your intentions." "I was going to give it back." "After you broke it. And then you demanded Mr. Vance pay you thousands of dollars for injuries you caused yourself while using his stolen property. Is that correct?" "It wasn't like that." Marcus pulled out the letters Brenda had sent. "You wrote here, and I quote, 'You are liable for these expenses.' You demanded $4,197. That's extortion, Mrs. Morrison." "Objection. Argumentative," Brenda's lawyer said weakly. "Sustained, but make your point, Mr. Webb," Judge Romano said. "Mrs. Morrison, isn't it true that, when Mr. Vance refused to pay your fraudulent claims, you retaliated by issuing more violation notices and threatening to have him removed from the HOA? Those violations were legitimate." "A violation for having damaged equipment visible from the street when that equipment was damaged because you broke it." Brenda didn't answer. No further questions. The trial concluded on a Wednesday afternoon. Judge Romano said he would issue his ruling within a week. 6 days later, I received the decision in the mail. Judge Romano ruled in my favor on every count. Brenda was ordered to pay $840 for the snowblower repairs, $5,000 in damages for harassment and emotional distress, and $12,000 in punitive damages. She was also ordered to pay my legal fees, which totaled another $8,000. The total judgment against her was $25,840. Marcus called me as soon as he got the ruling. "We won everything. Congratulations, Xavier. Do you think she'll actually pay?" "She doesn't have a choice. We can garnish her wages or put a lien on her house if she doesn't. And honestly, with the criminal charges she's facing, paying this judgment might be the least of her problems." He was right. In late April, Brenda pleaded guilty to embezzlement and theft in criminal court. She was sentenced to 18 months in prison, followed by 3 years of probation. She was also ordered to pay full restitution to the HOA, which came to $43,000. Her husband Robert quietly divorced her while she was awaiting sentencing. He moved out of Meadowbrook Estates, and their house went up for sale. As for me, I eventually received payment for the judgment through a combination of seized assets and a payment plan arranged by her public defender. It took almost a year to receive the full amount, but I got every penny. The HOA underwent a complete restructuring. Donald served as president for a year, and he systematically eliminated about 60% of the rules Brenda had created. The new HOA focused on basic community maintenance and safety, rather than micromanaging every aspect of residents' lives. I even ended up joining the HOA board myself at the request of several neighbors. They thought having someone who had stood up to tyrannical leadership would help keep things balanced. I agreed to serve a 2-year term. My snowblower, once repaired, worked perfectly. I used it regularly during Buffalo's snowy winters, and every time I fired it up, I thought about that December morning when Brenda Morrison made the worst decision of her life. The neighborhood became a different place after Brenda's arrest. People were friendlier, more relaxed. They painted their doors whatever color they wanted. They parked their cars in any direction. They planted gardens full of whatever flowers made them happy. Property values didn't collapse like Brenda had always warned they would. In fact, they went up slightly, probably because people actually wanted to live in a neighborhood that wasn't run like a prison camp. I heard through the grapevine that Brenda was released early for good behavior after serving 11 months. She moved to somewhere in Pennsylvania to live with her sister. I never saw her again. The whole experience taught me a lot about standing up for yourself, even when it's uncomfortable or scary. Brenda had counted on people being too intimidated to fight back, and for years it had worked. But once someone finally said no and backed it up with evidence and legal action, her entire house of cards collapsed. I still live in Meadowbrook Estates. My house is paid off, my driveway is clear, and my snowblower sits safely in my garage, ready for Buffalo's next big storm. No HOA Karen is ever going to take it again. Looking back, the whole situation seems almost absurd. A middle-aged woman so consumed with petty power that she couldn't see how completely insane her actions were. She stole a snowblower, broke it, injured herself through her own incompetence, tried to extort thousands of dollars, and then got arrested for embezzling HOA funds. It's like something out of a dark comedy, except it was real life, and it cost her everything. The neighborhood still talks about it sometimes. New residents who buy houses in Meadowbrook Estates eventually hear the story of the crazy HOA president who stole a snowblower and went to prison. It's become neighborhood legend, a cautionary tale about what happens when you give someone a tiny bit of authority and they let it go to their head. I've thought a lot about what motivated Brenda. Was it really about community standards, or was it something deeper? Maybe she felt powerless in other areas of her life, and the HOA presidency was her way of feeling important. Maybe she genuinely believed she was doing the right thing, and somehow justified the embezzlement as payment for her hard work. Or maybe she was just a narcissist who enjoyed controlling people. Whatever her motivations, the result was the same. She destroyed her own life through a combination of theft, fraud, and an inability to admit when she was wrong. If she had just apologized that morning, returned my snowblower, and paid for the repairs, none of the rest would have happened. But she couldn't do that. She had to double down, triple down, and keep going until she had committed actual crimes. The irony is that she really did believe she was helping the community. In her mind, she was the hero keeping everyone in line and maintaining standards. She couldn't see that she had become the villain of her own story, terrorizing innocent people over trivial nonsense while stealing their money. I've tried to take a different approach as an HOA board member. I focus on actual issues that affect property values and safety, legitimate concerns like making sure the roads are maintained and the common areas are kept clean. I don't care what color someone's mailbox is or whether their grass is exactly 2.5 inches tall. Life's too short for that kind of pettiness. Some people have asked me if I feel bad about what happened to Brenda. The honest answer is no, not really. I feel bad for her family, especially her ex-husband who seemed like a decent guy caught in a nightmare. But Brenda made her choices. She chose to steal. She chose to lie. She chose to embezzle. She chose to abuse her authority. Those were all her decisions, and she has to live with the consequences. If anything, I'm grateful it happened to me rather than someone more vulnerable. I had the resources to fight back, to hire a good lawyer, to stand up to her intimidation tactics. A lot of people in the neighborhood didn't have those resources. They paid her fraudulent fines because they were scared or couldn't afford to fight. At least by standing up to her, I helped expose what she was doing and stopped her from victimizing more people. The whole experience also taught me about the importance of documentation. If I hadn't taken that video, if I hadn't saved all those letters and violation notices, if I hadn't kept detailed records, it would have been much harder to prove my case. In any dispute, but especially in legal matters, documentation is everything. Marcus told me later that cases like mine are more common than people think. HOAs run by petty tyrants who abuse their authority and sometimes engage in outright fraud. He said most people just pay the fines and suffer in silence because they don't realize they have options. But you always have options. You can fight back, you can document everything, and you can hold people accountable. The new HOA board implemented a bunch of safeguards to prevent another Brenda situation. All financial transactions require 2 signatures. There's a monthly financial report distributed to all residents. Board meetings are recorded and minutes are published online. Fines can only be issued after a formal hearing where the homeowner can present their side, and there are term limits for all board positions. These seem like common sense measures, but they weren't in place before. Brenda had basically run the HOA like her personal kingdom with minimal oversight. Once the board started looking into her activities, they were shocked at how much autonomy she had claimed for herself. I've also become something of an accidental advocate for HOA reform. I was interviewed by a local news station about my experience, and that led to speaking at a county commission meeting about the need for better oversight of HOAs. New York State actually has relatively weak laws governing HOAs compared to some other states, and there's a movement to strengthen them. My story became part of that discussion. How someone can abuse the system, how residents can be intimidated and exploited, how embezzlement can go undetected for years without proper financial controls. I'm not a political person, but if sharing my experience helps prevent others from going through the same thing, then something good came out of it. These days, life in Meadowbrook Estates is peaceful. I have good relationships with my neighbors. We help each other out with things like snow removal and lawn care, but out of genuine neighborliness, not because some HOA rule requires it. The community has a much better vibe now that people aren't living in fear of arbitrary violation notices. I eventually replaced my snowblower with an even better model, though I keep my garage locked now. Call it paranoia, but once someone steals your stuff and tries to ruin your life over it, you take security more seriously. I also installed cameras around my property, just in case. Better safe than sorry. Winter in Buffalo means serious snow, and having reliable equipment is essential. This year we've already had 3 major storms, and my new snowblower has handled them all beautifully. My sidewalks are always clear, my driveway is pristine, and I've never once received a violation notice from the new HOA board. Because I'm reasonable about maintaining my property, and they're reasonable about enforcement. It's amazing how well things work when people act like adults. I've helped several neighbors who were dealing with their own property disputes, not with our HOA but with other organizations and situations. I share my story, I share what I learned, and I refer them to Marcus if they need legal help. Knowledge is power, and the more people understand their rights, the harder it is for petty tyrants to abuse them. Every time I see that walking boot Brenda wore in court, or those fake neck braces people wear to exaggerate injuries, I think about how ridiculous her whole performance was. She really thought a judge would buy that she was the victim. She really thought she could steal someone's property, break it, hurt herself, and then collect thousands of dollars in damages. The audacity of it still amazes me, but that's the thing about people who abuse power. They start to believe their own delusions. They convince themselves that the rules don't apply to them, that they're special, that they are above accountability. And then reality comes crashing down, and they're shocked when they face consequences. The last I heard, Brenda was working at a retail job somewhere in Pennsylvania. She's probably banned from ever serving on an HOA board again, though I don't know if that's a formal legal restriction or just common sense. Either way, I doubt any neighborhood would want her in a position of authority after what happened. Her former house sold to a nice young couple with 2 kids. They're good neighbors, friendly and normal. Sometimes I help them with their snowblower when they're having trouble with it, showing them the proper technique. They have no idea about the drama that took place right next door to them, and I don't bring it up unless asked. That chapter is closed. As I sit here looking out at my snow-covered lawn, my properly functioning snowblower safely stored in my locked garage, I feel a sense of satisfaction. I stood up to a bully, I fought for what was right, and justice was served. It wasn't easy, it wasn't cheap, and there were times I wondered if it was worth the stress. But in the end, it absolutely was. Brenda Morrison stole my snowblower, broke it, and demanded I pay her medical bills. Instead, she ended up paying me, losing her position, losing her marriage, and going to prison. That's not revenge, that's just consequences. And sometimes, consequences are exactly what people need. I never wanted to be the guy who sued his HOA president and helped send her to prison. I just wanted to clear my driveway in peace. But when she crossed that line, when she stole my property and tried to extort me, she left me no choice. And I'm glad I fought back, not just for myself, but for everyone else she had victimized over the years. The neighborhood is better now. The HOA is better now. And I've learned valuable lessons about documentation, standing up for yourself, and the importance of holding people accountable no matter what title or position they claim to have. So if you're reading this and you're dealing with your own HOA nightmare, know that you have options. Document everything, know your rights, don't be afraid to hire a lawyer, and don't let anyone intimidate you into accepting abuse. It might seem easier to just pay the fine or comply with the unreasonable demand, but all that does is enable the behavior and make you a victim. I chose to fight, and I won. And if I can do it, so can you. Because at the end of the day, we all deserve to live in our homes without being harassed, extorted, or stolen from, no matter what some power-hungry HOA Karen thinks she can get away with. The law is on your side if you're willing to use it, and sometimes that's exactly what justice looks like. A broken snowblower led to a broken tyrant, and an entire community was freed from her reign of petty terror. And honestly, I couldn't have written a better ending if I tried.